Now, you've all really come to hear Ken. Ken Loach, filmmaker, social campaigner, well known to you all, I know. All of us will remember different ones of his films that really resonate in our memories. His most recent film, I, Daniel Blake, won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, and his films follow a real gritty part of the social aspects of life and social exclusion, and really get down under the surface of what life is really about, even in really lovely places. And that's something I know that Ken feels very passionately about as a social campaigner as well as a filmmaker. Ken has lived in Bath for a number of years and is very much involved in the programme to try and help Bath City Football Club with its future, and both he and his wife are life members of this trust. The BPT's remit is for the whole of the city of Bath, and I think it's really important, therefore, that we should consider some of the more challenging contexts in our activities, as well as the beautiful buildings that we all love. So the brief that we discussed with Ken was another city. I don't know if that's what he's going to talk about, but Ken, would you like to come up and use the microphone? A round of applause, please, for Ken.
I got really nervous while I was waiting, so I had to have a glass of water. Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Caroline. And thank you for asking me to say a few words. If I was nervous when I came in, having heard the articulate and sharp opinions being aired, I'm clearly not going to get away with anything here. So I hope you find something of interest in the thoughts I have, which may well be very similar to the thoughts you have about the city that we've all lived in for many years and grown to care for, and be very fond of, and to be anxious for, to be honest, to be anxious for. And thinking of the title, Another City, I thought, well, there are three images of the city that come to my mind through living here, and it was those three images that I thought I would share with you. We came in 1974, which was a long time ago now. Probably some of you have been here even longer than we have. But it was a city that was quite beguiling. It was sooty, it was dusty, it was a bit dilapidated, but it was 250 years old. And you sense that age, and you sense its past. And it wore its age with a great grace, and it was integrated. It seemed to have a unity about it, and it seemed to be self-sufficient. And we'll all have particular memories from that time of the shops that were special then and have disappeared now. Some will remember the Red House Bakery, I'm sure, with the stern ladies who organised the queue very thoroughly, and if you didn't know exactly what you wanted, you went to the back of the class. The ironmongers in George Street with that wonderful balcony in the ceiling. Don't know if anyone else remembers that. And the greengrocers at the bottom of Milsom Street. That was a real greengrocers. And Jolly's sold food instead of just the usual names on the clothes. The trains got to London in 1 hour, 9 minutes. Who else caught that train at 1 hour, 9 minutes from the station? It was a very good train. Same faces every day. And it wasn't too expensive. In fact, I lived in Bath for 17 years and just commuted most days. And it wasn't that difficult. 1 hour, 9 minutes. It was British Rail then, of course. And so it was a city that had a magic, and it was a city in which its age was palpable. And I think that's important. And of course, there's some wonderful restorations, and we're in one now, and it's beautifully done and absolutely evocative of the time it was built. But it's not always like that. And so that's the first image I have of Bath. It's the Bath that we came to and came to one weekend and thought there's no place we'd rather live than here. And we were very lucky. And then the second image of Bath, of another city, is today's tourist Bath. And to my mind, and I don't know if I'm sure you'll have very strong opinions about this, but thinking of its characteristics now, it seems to me it's clean, a lot of it is over-restored, it's like a senior citizen with Botox, and too much cosmetic surgery has gone on. It's self-conscious about its age, it's parading its age, it's blatant in the way Bath used to be discreet, and you could discover things that you felt no one else had seen. You can't discover much now. There it is, bang, right in front of you, spick and span, and right adjoining it, there's another building that plainly isn't 18th century or early 19th century. It's plainly a reproduction. And I think this is one of the key things about the Bath that we have allowed to develop, is that it's in danger of being overwhelmed by repro. It's in danger of being overwhelmed by a kind of pseudo-Bath. And you look at the number of buildings that are going up, and yes, the proportions are roughly right. Probably the windows are a bit small, and you know what is meant to be ashlar is about that thick, or it's a composite something, and it won't age. But it's like if you had an old master painting, and a third of it was missing, so you touch it up. And then suddenly, well, we could improve that bit, so we'll touch that up as well. And in the end, you don't have a painting of any great age. You have a kind of pseudo-painting. And I think this is what we're in danger of. And I think we're in danger of filling those spaces between the buildings, the old buildings, where your imagination can work, and you can see the Bath of the past. And if you fill that with a reproduction bit of kitsch, it doesn't get your imagination firing in the way it would if the buildings were old and dusty and sooty and a bit, in need of some treatment. But you sense its past, and I feel that we're losing that sense of the past. Why? Because money is to be made. And the money is to be made by tourism, and we're promoting tourism for all it's worth, and tourism needs hotels, and tourism needs this, and the cost of the shops goes up, and so of course we have the chain shops that you can see in every city that you go into. No Red House, no ironmongers in George Street, no greengrocers bottom of Milsom Street. You'll find the names, you'll find everywhere. And I think there's a contradiction here, because the more tourism is promoted, the more it kills what tourism is trying to sell. Because what are you selling? You're selling being trapped in a crowd of people who are all photographing the same building. You'll be in someone else's selfie. You don't see the city, you see the tourists. And you're part of it, and you're moving along. And I mean, we know, being old, grumpy old people, we know a lot of the school parties are busy chatting each other up. They're not entranced by 18th century buildings. They're entranced with a kid that they're walking alongside. And I think that's the problem. Tourism kills. and tourism will keep expanding, and it will keep squashing the Bath that we know and care for. And that's my fear. I'm very pleased the Trust is going to fight for the Mineral Hospital, but let's give it a use that will serve the community, not just get more and more tourists in that will fill the spaces. You've spoken about transport, and transport is a big issue, and I mean, there are people here who know far more about transport than me, but one quotation I came across looking at the Vanishing Bath, and Vanishing Bath was the book we read when we first moved to Bath, and we thought, well, it's happened now, you know. What we're enjoying now will stay, because people have cottoned on that you can't destroy the city in the way it has been destroyed, as wrong we were. But there's one very good quote in there from a man called Thomas Sharp, who's was a town planner. I hope he's still with us, you never know. Thomas Sharp in 1969, and he wrote, "Years ago, we planners used to think in terms of planning our towns to meet the needs of traffic. Such town planning would be madness now. We must plan and control the traffic to meet the needs of the town." Well, what a good idea. Why don't we say, what does this city need? What does this city need so that we can hand it on in the best possible condition to people who will come after us? And it certainly doesn't need cable cars. And it certainly doesn't need trams. It does need an integrated transport system, and that's maybe a bit beyond the control of even our council. That's maybe a national issue, because we need integrated trains, we need integrated buses, I would say publicly owned so that they can be planned, and so that the less popular routes will have as good a service as the most popular routes. And the more popular routes will subsidize the less popular routes, and we just make a plan so that everyone can get into the center easily. And we start to eliminate the cars, and we certainly don't tear up our valued meadows and green hills and spaces around the city. What madness that would be. What absolute madness. That's what we have to cherish. We cherish the city, and we make the traffic fit that. Then we might have a city to pass on. And while I'm on it, I don't want to talk about the wreck. But how can you not? How can you not? I mean, we all know, and some have a greater appetite for following the legal wrangles than I do, and maybe follow it more assiduously. And the legal wrangles go backwards and forward because the lawyers are very good at finding points of order and points that have to be referred and then reassessed, and another court and another appeal court, and then we'll hire someone else and they'll have an opinion and that has to be resolved, and so on and so on. And it goes on, and Caroline said 10 years and, well, maybe even longer. We know the main issue. We know it. Everybody knows it if they're honest. It was given to the citizens in the 20s for all sports, for all citizens, no sport to have a preference, and everything that's happened is a betrayal of that. And the people who've done the betraying, they know what they're doing. They know big money's involved. They know there's a shopkeeper, and no disrespect to shopkeepers here, I'm sure there's some very good ones, but what is known as the shopkeeper mentality, money next week, more people coming in, give us a bigger stadium, we'll make more money. And it's not, and we know it's a betrayal. We know it's there for everyone. It should be a complete green space, absolutely, for everyone to come in, walk the dog, play with the kids, have a kick around, play cricket, do whatever. It's ours. But hey, no, it isn't, because somebody's got their hands on it. What a betrayal. And of course, what makes it worse, if there is to be a big building, it's the interest of one company, one corporation, owned by one very rich man, sponsored by another very rich man, who cares so much about his own country that he closed his factory here and went to Malaysia. Why? Well, I don't know, but the minimum wage here is £7.50 an hour. In Malaysia, it's just over £1 an hour. I don't know, I'll leave it to you. Think I had a connection? I just wonder. It's about power, it's about money, it's about greed, and it's about ambition for one group, one body. And if we allow that green space to be taken from the people of Bath, we will never forgive ourselves. So let's make certain it doesn't happen. And again, the irony is that the more we are true to the spirit of the city, the more valuable Bath is for tourists. Bizarrely, stop this superfluous building, kill that stadium, and Bath becomes much more attractive. It is a green space. You can see the backs of the 18th century houses. The Abbey is framed by green. Much more valuable for tourists. But the short-sighted, let's get it done, more money next year, the bottom line, that's what drives us. In the end, that's what kills us. So that's my second image of Bath, of another city. And the third one, that was the Bath that the tourists see. I want to talk to you a little bit about the Bath the tourists don't see. Because Britain is a divided country, and Bath is a divided city. And many thousands of people within this city live in poverty, live in insecurity, and live in hunger. You don't believe me? Okay, a few statistics. Bath is a pretty affluent city, I guess everyone would agree. There are 5 neighbourhoods in Bath that are in the 20% most deprived in the country. 5 neighbourhoods. 3 of those are in Twerton. Child poverty in Bath, not a big problem. In Twerton, 38% of children live in poverty. Life expectancy. Okay, we're all going to live. I can tell from this audience we're not doing too badly. Life expectancy. A baby boy born in Lansdowne, or even in where I live in, we live in around Bathwick, will live 9 years longer than a baby boy born in Twerton. 9 years longer. Now, that's pretty shocking. We can't be comfortable with that. And a lot of people are living on the edge through low pay, through precarious jobs, where you might get if you're working for an agency, you might get a phone call the night before saying, okay, you've got a shift tomorrow, but you've got to be there at 6 o'clock. Or, no, you're not working tomorrow. And you won't get any work that week. So then you've got bills to pay. So what do? 0 hours, where the employer demands that the person who's going to work for them is available every hour of the day and night, and the employer makes no commitment to give a certain number of hours work. So you might have a minimum wage on an hourly basis, but you've got no hours work, it doesn't mean anything. So a minimum wage per hour doesn't mean much if you're only going to do a dozen hours work a week or 16 hours a week. And that's why we have so many people in the working poor. I forget the national statistic. I think it's something like 6 or 7 million people, 6 or 7 million, who are working and so poor they can't survive on their income. One small thing can drive a family into debt. Say your washing machine gives up, the fridge doesn't work. What are you going to do? You don't have the money to repair it. a frequent thing that can happen to you is that if you're working poor, you need assistance from the state. So if that payment is delayed, then you're screwed. You're lost. And that happens on a regular basis. That's part of the bureaucratic nature of the system. Some think it's quite conscious. That's actually what happens. The delay is built in to bureaucracy. And so what do? You borrow. You borrow. And one support worker, in one of the people I spoke to just recently, said that 80% of the people who come looking for help are in debt. That debt can be a few thousand, a few hundreds, a few thousands. It can be up to 30,000. And the person you're in debt to may sell your debt on. And then you're in debt to a loan shark. And they don't take prisoners. And there are many, many families not far from here who are terrified of the debt they're in. Terrified. There's the sanctions regime are this is what Thomas was kind enough to mention the film we just did. This was part of that story. The sanctions regime are knowingly cruel. I mean, you can be sanctioned when you desperately need money. You can be sanctioned because you're a few minutes late for an appointment. We could tell many stories about people sanctioned for no reason. There's something called an assessment, a work capability assessment, where your GP or your consultant will say, this person is not fit for work, but the state will assess you by employing an American company, multinational company called Maximus, and they will quiz you and score points, and you'll score a number of points. If you don't get enough points, doesn't matter what your doctor says, you've got to work. And if you don't work, you get no money. And you might have young children. So what do you do? And there's a story about that. I heard of a single mum. She got 4 kids. They're aged 12, 6, 5, and 1. And she would say, you've got to go back to work. This is in Bath. You've got to go back to work. Okay, you've got to go back to work. And the advisor, and I forget the exact status of the advisor, but she was somebody in official person, said, and this is what was quoted to me, that she was told it's more important to pay the rent than feed the kids. So what would you do? What would you do? Housing is a huge issue, as we know and has been said. The prices are incredibly high in Bath. And why wouldn't they be? It's a wonderful place to live. The houses are intensely beautiful. The environment takes your breath away. But they're very high. So working class families are squeezed out. So you end up with the donut effect, where the centre the families the people who are going to do the work to maintain the city can't live here. It's happening in many cities, this. And so we know the homeless families on the streets, but there's a lot of hidden homeless. So people are sofa surfing, the term is. You kip on somebody's sofa for a few days until they're fed up with you, and then you find another pal, and you go round, and you go round. And I heard one story about a young couple who had a 4-week-old child, and they were living just up the road in a small flat where the mother's parents were there, and a lot of teenage boys were there. I don't know the exact figures, but the couple with the 4-week-old baby were in one room. The mother was on the sofa in the living room, and the family couldn't contain it after a few weeks. So they went to another family, and then they went to another friend, and then they went somewhere else. And the mother was so distressed that she couldn't breastfeed her child anymore. Well, it may not seem a huge amount to people, Oh, so what? Doesn't matter. That's what happens when you're poor. But actually, it should matter to us, I think. think that should matter to us. I heard another story of a man called Tom, not his real name, of course, a disabled man who was housebound with a serious illness which involved water retention, and I don't know the exact details, but he was given, from accommodation that was totally unsuitable, he was given a ground floor flat, again in Bath, given a ground floor flat. Now, obviously he was needed financial support. Now, when that happens, the bureaucratic system is so arcane that if you change your accommodation, your whole benefit structure has to be revised. And you go to something from the system you were on before, you then go to something called universal credit. Now, I haven't been on universal credit, and you probably haven't been on universal credit. It was the brainchild of one Ian Duncan Smith. Sorry, I need a glass of water after that. Ian Duncan Smith. And what happened to Tom was this. He was asked to go for an interview, because every time you're transferred to universal credit, you have to be interviewed. Tom couldn't get there to the interview. He couldn't move. Okay, but he got a text. Also, the text was for the meeting that had happened before he received the text. The date was out of date. So he couldn't get there, and he couldn't have got there even if it was in date. So friends and phone calls were made, but too late, his money had stopped. So he had nothing. And this went on for weeks. And finally, through friends and advice, he got it reinstated. But that's the mentality, that when you're poor, and particularly when you're sick or you're disabled, you are faced with this wall of bureaucracy that it would take even the people who were asking the most challenging questions tonight would struggle with. I would struggle with. And many people don't have a computer anyway and aren't very good at computers. And so they can't begin to deal with it. And the people putting it in place know that. That is what is so consciously cruel about it. They know it. And it's happening to hundreds of people in our city. Social housing. Of course, a huge problem with a lack of social housing. Chronic shortage. There's lots to say about that, but I'll only quote the Fox Hill residents, where the redevelopment is happening, and the Fox Hill residents are organising and campaigning because the social housing is being cut. There will be fewer social houses for rent. Now, in a city which is crying out for homes for people who live here, for families who live here, to cut the social housing, it seems to be monstrous. But that's what the Fox Hill residents are saying. They're saying the tenants will be moved out, there'll be a loss of green space, there'll be too many expensive houses for sale, and it will change the character of the area. So that's what they're saying, and why shouldn't we believe them? Because they live there. They're going to live through it. They're going to live through the disruption for years. It's not part of Georgian Bath, but it's part of our Bath. And finally, hunger. Hunger. Hunger is used as a weapon. When you're poor and given the advice, pay the rent, don't feed the kids, okay? So, hunger. And I won't say too much about that. You can imagine it. You wake up in the middle of the night. What are you going to do? You've got kids in the house, you've got nothing in the fridge. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Fortunately, there are food banks. And we've got 3 food banks in Bath, or 3 outlets, 1 food bank with 3 places for distribution. And there are food runs for the homeless. And again, one person who is involved in that, in the food runs, told me that now many people are coming for food who are not homeless, who've got somewhere to live, but they are so desperate that they're going for charity food. In our city, in the centre of Bath, this is. In the centre of Bath. So that's our city. And the one number from the food banks In 1 year, that's April last year to March this year, there was a 13% rise in the use of charity food banks. So, and 3,000 people were helped with 3 parcels each. 3,000 people. And of that, nearly 1,000 were children. The estimate was 900 children would not eat unless you, I'm sure, and some of us put an extra can in whichever supermarket you go to. There are some great charities and support organizations. Some I know, and I'm sure there are many I don't know. The ones I know is there's Genesis, who runs the food bank, the DHI with Rosie Phillips, that does terrific work. Mentoring Plus helps young people, and Southside, the Southside Project does fantastic work, and I'm really pleased that Penny McKissick and Sharon Wiseman have come tonight to be here. So I'm really pleased that they're here. There is one bit of good news from Twerton. You'll be pleased after this litany of despair. You'll be pleased to know one bit of good news. Bath City. Bath City is on its way to being community owned. And it's extremely democratic. We have no millionaires living abroad. Taxed, what are they, non-doms or whatever they are? None of those. It's anyone could become a member, whether of a small amount, and everyone gets one vote. So everyone votes for the board, and all the major issues, very democratic, right in the heart of Twerton. It has programs for schools. It's hoping to help regenerate the neighborhood completely. It's a great way to watch football. I'm doing the commercial now. It's a great way to watch football if you have kids, or you like it yourself, or you've got families or grandchildren. It's a great Saturday afternoon. There's some fantastic characters down there. It's a people's club. And if you're choosing to watch a game on a Saturday afternoon, choose the People's Club, I do urge you. One thing about Bath City that I think no other club in the city can claim to is that Bath City featured in the Amnesty magazine, the latest edition, as when we welcomed the Syrian refugees. And there we are in the center of the Amnesty magazine with the heading, "What did the Romans do for us?" The Romans being the football club. So there you are. That shows the spirit of the club. It's outward looking. It's very human. You'll be very welcome. Not sure about the pies, but there you go. You can't have everything. And one other thing, the Bath Football Club will be redeveloped. And I'm very anxious that Bath Preservation Trust really is involved in how that redevelopment happens. Because that part of Bath, that really needs some good buildings. And let's hope that Thomas and Caroline, I'm not on the board, so I can't, it's not within my gift, but I will urge that the Preservation Trust cherishes Twerton as much as it cherishes the Royal Crescent. So to sum up, sorry, I've spoken too long. What kind of Bath do we want to preserve? That's the big question underlying this. What kind of Bath do we want to preserve, to hand on? I suggest it should be integrated, one city, it should be without poverty, and it should be without the super rich. Tourists should be welcome, but we shouldn't scrap everything to bring them in. We should welcome them, yes, but this is a working, functioning city that is for everyone. So you're not going to get all the hotels you want, and you might not get every room en suite, to use that horrible phrase. So, yes, come, but you've got to take us as you find us. And all people are respected. And people in one part of Bath can look forward to as long a life as people in the other part of Bath. That would be good. One last thing, looking through while I was thinking what to say, I discovered that in 1966, that's a few years before we came, Bath City played in an FA Cup round and 6,500 people came. And it wasn't a league team, 6,500. In the same year, this is very contentious, you might leave at this point. In the same year, Labour only missed sending an MP by 800 votes. Now there's something to think on. And you know, I sense that in the last few months, there's a new spirit in this country. I think there's a new interest in social justice, in people living with each other, in respecting each other. And that's a political choice. You know, it won't happen unless we make it happen. But who knows? Those figures from 1966, we might do better quite soon. Thanks very much.
I agree.